Hi, welcome to my full bookshelf. My name is Federica and today we're talking about the books I read over the summer. This video was supposed to be two videos, a reading wrap up for the month of July and one for the month of August. But turns out I spent the entire month of August away, so I didn't have the books with me and didn't have time well actually I have plenty of time, but wheels to film? Zero. So let's enjoy an extremely long video. I have with me a huge, well not really huge for my taste. It's a cup of English tea, which I never usually drink. It's either white tea or green tea or herbal tea, but today I felt like I needed that extra kick. So I've got in my trusty Kip cup and we're going to talk about a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books, which I've read over the course of 2 months. I'm filming this on the 1st of September, so we literally just entered autumn, and to celebrate I decided to do my makeup, which I haven't done in the entire year. I don't know, I did my eyebrows every so often. The rest of my makeup, zero since we started quarantine, but hey ho, life in quarantine. But today I was feeling the lipstick, I was feeling the, eyebrows. It's a whole different situation. I need to go for threading, but I'm currently in quarantine because I was in the Netherlands for just one night, but that one night is long enough to be quarantined. So that's my life for the next couple of weeks. Well, first week is almost gone, so one more week. But yeah, get your tea, get your coffee, get water. Everybody needs to drink a cup of water. But let's dig in. So the first book I'm going to talk about today is a book that is really special for me. It's not a book that I wrote, it's not a book that I'm particularly connected with, but it's a book that my friend Lauren wrote. I've known Lauren since 2011, 2012, and we met on, WordPress. I had a blog and she had a blog, and we were sort of reading each other's blog and commenting on each other's posts. And that's how this sort of friendship started, and then we added each other on social media accounts and then kept in touch over the years. But basically a couple of years ago Lauren got a book deal, and it's fantastic because I used to absolutely love her writing, and she's got so many stories to tell. She's a really creative person, so I was so emotional when I got this parcel in the mail. But the book I'm talking about is Inconvenient Daughter by Lauren J. Sharkey. And Inconvenient Daughter follows the story of the main character, who is Rowan. Rowan is sort of like a teenage, she starts as a kid in the narration and then evolves into a teenager, early 20s. She's an interracial adoptee. She was born in South Korea, and then she was adopted by white Irish Catholic New Yorker parents who live in Long Island. The character of Rowan is not Lauren, but draws on Lauren's personal experience of being a transracial adoptee. Lauren, just like Rowan, was adopted by white Irish Catholic New Yorker parents, and she was born in South Korea. The book itself follows the story of Rowan as she sort of grows up and faces a lot of those struggles that probably people who are adopted into a culture that is not their own, as in their birth culture, have to face. And things that I did not, obviously being white and having grown up in a white country, I'm not adopted. I do know a bunch of adopted people, and they all have incredibly different experiences amongst them, even though they're raised in fairly similar contexts. But obviously being a white European non-adopted person, I did not even know that so many struggles and so many little acts of racism that interracial adoptees have to face, well, in the United States in this case, but probably all over the world. So that was really eye-opening for me. But Rowan is this character who has this really controversial relationship with herself and with her mother as well. This is not to say that they don't love each other, it's just that they have just a very sort of controversial relationship in terms of they maybe don't understand each other, and maybe what they think is that the other person is only out there to hurt them and to make their life more difficult, whereas obviously a mother and a daughter have a special relationship in hopefully most cases in which they try love each other unconditionally, even without knowing it. This is a book that comes with a disclaimer as well. I do feel the need to say that there is mental, emotional and physical abuse described in this book. So if you have personal experiences with these topics and you don't feel comfortable reading about them, this book is not for you. I'm not saying that it's particularly graphic, but obviously it does touch upon those topics, and as somebody who has not been affected by this kind of matters, it was not triggering for me, but I think it might be triggering for some people, so just be aware that this happens in this book at some point. Going back to the main character, as I said, she has a strange not strange, but controversial relationship and quite hard relationship with her adoptive mother. And because of this strange relationship, you will see throughout the book that her life and some decisions that she takes in her life are dictated more by a need to be a certain person rather than by the fact that she is a certain person, or she has certain interests, or she wants to behave in a certain way. This book is a book that, as I said, is really important for me. I am so proud of my friend, and I definitely recommend you read this if you have people in your life who are adoptees, whether they're interracial adoptees or not, just because this gives you really some sort of window into what life might be like for them. Obviously, as I said, I know a lot of people who have been adopted when they were children mostly, and they all have incredibly different relationships with themselves, with their identity and with their adoptive parents. So I do understand that this is not something that fits all. It's not a book that will resonate with every adoptee or with every person who has adopted somebody or with every person who knows somebody who's been adopted. But it is an important read because it makes you understand, as somebody who is not connected to the adoptee narrative, about so many things that happen and you don't realize how happening around you. That being said, this book for me is a 3.5 star, not because I didn't like it. As I said in many videos, for me a 3-star read is a solid read that did what it came for, delivered, it was pleasant, it was nicely written, and then it ended. The reason why I didn't give this book a higher rating is not because I didn't like it, because as I said, I liked it. I felt like the narration was a little bit rushed in some points. I felt like it could have done with being a little bit longer and explaining, especially towards the ending. There is a big sort of change in the main character. There is a sort of big development in Rowan's life. And I would have loved to see more of that, how she came to certain conclusions, how she came to become the Rowan that she is at the end. So that would have been interesting to see, and that is why this is more like a 3.5 star rather than a 4-star. But as I said, if you have an adoptee in your life, whether that's a friend, whether that's your sibling, whether that's yourself, I've heard so many beautiful reviews about this in terms of how many people felt represented in a book, and I think this definitely deserves some attention. So do pick it up, order it from the Azar books, I think is the publisher. I don't know whether they actually sell the books themselves or not. I bought it from an independent bookshop who ordered it from the the US. Pick it up and give Lauren some love. She's also on Instagram and on Twitter. On Twitter? I'm not sure. But she's on Instagram for sure. At the LJ Sharkey or at Inconvenient Daughter Book. I don't know. I'll put everything on screen so you can give her some love. Let's move on to the second book I read in July. That book was The Adventures of China Iron, or China Iron. I mentioned this book in my International Booker Prize shortlist and prediction for the winner that I put out last week. That video, let me just tell you, it got so much interaction in terms of views and in terms of likes compared to my other videos. I am so chuffed, and probably has to do with the fact that I predicted who was going to win the International Booker Prize, and I absolutely loved the winner. I was so happy about it. But yeah, that video got a lot of attention. I got some new subscribers, so if you've come because of that, hello, thank you for subscribing. But moving on to this book, this was also on the shortlist for the International Booker Prize. And this is written by Gabriela, Cabezón, Cámara. I speak Spanish and I should know how to read the accents, but sometimes I forget. But anyway, This is some sort of retelling of a typical Argentinian sort of folklore epic poem about Martin Fierro. Martin Fierro is also the name given to the main character's husband. The main character is a 14-year-old girl who lives in the pampas of Argentina. She has been abandoned when she was just a newborn baby, so she doesn't know who her actual parents are. She was left at this orphanage, raised by a woman and a man, and then married off to Martin Fierro, who is a much older man. By the time she's 14, she has 2 kids with him. He's described throughout the book as a good-for-nothing kind of husband, one of those people who doesn't have a lot of ambition, one of those people who is maybe sometimes violent for no reason whatsoever when he's in sort of social settings, like, you know, the pub sort of brawl and all that. Anyway, Martin is recruited into the army. The narration starts after he's already been in the army for a really long time. Don't know what happened to him. China doesn't know. And China decides that it's her chance to sort of live the life that she wanted to live. So with the excuse of saying she's going to look for her husband, she actually ends up leaving the 2 children that she's had with him to some sort of orphanage slash carer, and she starts an adventure. She goes through the pampas in Argentina and decides that it's her chance to get away from it all. At the very beginning of her journey, she encounters the other main character. Her name is Liz. She is an older woman, but she's not old. She's probably in her 30s from what I gather from narration, late 20s, early 30s. And she is an Irish settler in Argentina, and she's sort of traveling to the through the pampas to find her husband, who is somewhere else in the pampas. Throughout the narration, you see a lot of introspective narrative coming from China, and you discover more about her past, but also a lot about who she actually is. And you see her relationship to Liz changing throughout the book. You see her relationship to herself changing throughout the book. And you see also the relationship of both women sort of change to their environment. So while at the beginning of the journey they were travelers through the pampas, I feel like by the end of the journey, and I'm not giving away anything, they become part of the pampas. I'm not going to go into detail about what happens, but what I want to say is that reading this book was a fantastic experience. I went in completely blind, didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about Martin Fierro to this day. I only learned a little bit about it when the actual poem slash song is mentioned in the book. I found this book so liberating, so freeing, so relaxing, and so empowering at the same time. And the only reason why for me it's not a full 5 stars is because maybe I would have wanted to see a little bit more. So I would have wanted to see the journey being a little bit more discussed. I feel like the resolution is fairly quick, and I would have wanted to see a little bit more of what happens in the final chapters. That being said, it was such a fantastic experience. It's more like a 4.5 instead of a 4. It's closer to 5 than a 4, basically. And I would definitely recommend it to people. I know some people haven't really enjoyed it, and I do think it probably has to do a lot with yourself and your personal sexuality and all that. But as a woman, reading this book was so empowering, so powerful, and I encourage you to pick it up. Following up on my International Booker Prize shortlist, I decided to pick up this other book. I actually bought it the same day I bought The Adventures of Chinaeron. This book was also on the shortlist for the International Booker Prize. It's written by Shokoofeh Azar, and it's translated by an anonymous translator for reasons, I believe, of security, because it's a book originally written in Farsi? Persian? So I think because of political reasons and the content of this book, the translator had to hide their identity. This book is a book that has elements of magical realism that are basically on every single page. At the beginning of the narration, we meet the narrator, who's also the main character of the story. The narrator is Bahar. She's 13 and she's dead. And she tells a story as a ghost, seeing the events firsthand when we talk about the way she died, and also seeing the events from outside when she talks about her family and describes what's happening to her family. The book is set in 1979 in Iran during the Islamic Revolution and in the years that follow. That means that we see this family changing their habits and changing their sort of social status following the revolution. Baha's family are a fairly wealthy, cultured, educated family. They live in Tehran following the revolution in order to maintain their sort of authentic self. And that means religious freedom, sexual freedom, individual freedom. They decide to leave Tehran and go to a nearby village which is fairly rural. From there we see how the family sort of relates to the events that happened in Tehran. Each family member has a very different narrative, it has a very different story. What I found particularly interesting is that Baha, as I said, is a ghost. And she narrates the story, but she can be seen by members of her family. The same way she can see other ghosts, in the same way some member of the extended family can see her, as well as other ghosts. Again, this is a heavily reliant on magical realism narration. And a narrative like this is quite intriguing, but it can also be quite heavy to read for some people. So just be aware, if you want to pick it up, magical realism is heavy in this book. Magical realism is used in a really smart way because it's used to describe different topics that might not be necessarily as interesting or as engaging or as fascinating if they were explicitly talked about. That includes political issues, that includes religious issues, that includes sexual issues, and that includes sort of family dynamics and the will to find oneself in a way, because each character sort of goes through various transformations and various stages of transformation. Another thing that I really loved about this book is the fact that it has so many elements of typical Iranian culture and religion. Now, I mentioned this in my video about the International Booker Prize shortlist, but as somebody who considers themselves a person with no religion, even though I was raised in a very heavily Roman Catholic setting, a book like this is particularly interesting because it gives me the chance to learn about different cultures. And I think religion is such a big part of so many cultures that it really gave me a snapshot of life in Iran. It is a very intelligent book. It is not in your face in terms of political narration, but you can tell that almost every line can be read in different keys. You can see political critique oozing from this book, and it's beautiful to read. It's so smart. I love when an author sort of assumes that the reader is smart enough to understand a book like this, and this is why I gave this book 5 stars. Why I thought this could be one of the books, one of the 2 books to potentially win the International Booker Prize together with the Enlightenment. Together with the Discomfort of Evening. The key reason why I thought this might win was because of the translation. Translation is beautiful. Obviously, I didn't read the original one in Farsi, but it has, see, it has footnotes. Ooh, focus. It has footnotes, and I mean the one I showed you is probably really short, but look at this one. It gives you so much information, and obviously you have to consider that this is a book that was written for a certain audience, but it's been translated for a completely different audience, and obviously English is probably read by a majority sort of white Western person who doesn't necessarily have first-hand experience with the Middle East. So this was a great work of translation in my opinion, and there is the whole factor of the anonymous translator that obviously makes it quite interesting, but it goes beyond that, and it really shows how an international book, an international piece of literature really is a collaboration between the author and the translator. And other examples can be, you know, Elena Ferrante works translated by Anne Goldstein, and how beautiful that translation from Italian is. And let me tell you, I read them in both languages and they're fantastic. You can read the English one and almost have the same experience as reading the Italian one. So yeah, back to the book. Great book, 5 stars, pick it up. But it's heavy on magical realism, so if you don't like that, maybe not for you. The other book that I read was First Love, Last Rites. This was my challenge for the reading rush, the first book that you touch. I found this in a street library, and it was the first one that I touched because it's Ian McEwan. I love his narration, why not? Let's pick it up. No idea what it talked about. But I thought, it's short. It's a great book for a reading rush, right? Wrong. It took me nearly a week to finish this book, and let me tell you, I wasn't impressed. So first of all, it's a collection of short stories. I love short stories, but I need to be in the mood for them. I was not in the mood for short stories. I was in the mood for a novella or for a novel. So that was my mistake. As the title suggests, there is a lot of love in this book. There is a lot of love also taken to the extreme, as in extreme love, extreme passion, and all the beautiful things that can happen, but also all the bad things that can happen. This is another book that needs to come with a disclaimer. It needs to come with a disclaimer for sexual abuse. There is a lot, and I cannot stress that enough, a lot of sexual abuse in this book. I was not prepared to read a book like this, and I honestly wouldn't recommend it. I think I give this book 3 stars, but honestly, I would probably say 2 stars. There is one story that I particularly liked, and that is the first story. It's called Solid Geometry. It has elements of magical realism again. Seems like a trend. I love magical realism in a short story. It's fantastic, sort of Murakami-esque. The other story is simply talked about love and the extremes of love and passion taken to an almost brutal sort of force point. I wouldn't recommend it. As I said, it comes with a disclaimer. Not much to say about this. There is a vlog about the reading rush where I talk more about it, but meh, wouldn't recommend picking it up. My camera just died. I don't know why. Anyway, talking about this book. I was in Libreria, just off Brick Lane, looking at the books. It was Saturday or a Sunday. This book I think had come out in paperback that Thursday or that Friday, that week at some point. I wanted to buy it. I had picked it up. I was going towards the Tyll, and then I thought, I've got so many books on my TBR, I'll buy it in a couple of weeks. And then lockdown happened, and I never managed to buy that copy. Then I was on Amazon, and I had a very generous Amazon gift voucher to spend, and I thought, let me add it to my, shopping list from Amazon where I'm buying, shower curtain and all those exciting things. And then I do everything. I pay it and I wait for it, and then I get an email the day before it was supposed to be delivered saying that they had run out of copies and maybe they were going to have some more in a month or so. So that didn't quite work out. And then eventually they lifted some of the coronavirus restrictions, so some shops started to open up again, and there is this tiny sort of boutique shop that has some books as well, but it's mostly like homeware kind of bits and bobs that I had opened the week before lockdown started, so I hadn't managed to go in even a single time. I just saw it, I was like, oh, that looks really nice, we'll go back next week, and then next week, no. So I went in and I found the one and only copy they had of Girl, Woman, Other. So I bought it immediately, full price, from an independent business. So I felt really good as well about that instead of buying it off Amazon. And I read it and I left probably part of my soul on it. It's a fantastic book. It follows the lives of 12 different characters. Most of them are women. I'm saying most of them because there is a lot of LGBT plus discussion in this book as well. So not every character identifies as a woman, even though they might have been born as a woman or they might have been born as a man. Not giving much away, you realize who those characters are from, the very beginning of their chapters. Most of the women live in London, although not all of them, but they all live in the UK or have some connection to the UK, whether they were immigrants or whether they still live there. Whether they were immigrants or whether they were born there, second generation, first generation, forever generation. How do I talk about this book without giving too much away? Assume it's 12 short stories, and together they form this sort of map of the UK and broader of the British colonies as well in some cases, about how being a black woman, not all of them are fully black, but how being a woman, principally a black woman, how are you perceived and what kind of role do you have in society? And even when you manage to make it to the top, do you Do you succeed just as much as the other people, or are you expected to have some sort of stereotypes associated with you? Basically, it's a story, it's a whole book that has so many stories within it, and as somebody who lives in Southeast London, this really made me take a hard look at myself, at some of the people I know, and at their experiences, and I reconsidered a lot about my own privilege as well. As I said, I don't want to go too much into detail because this is a book that needs to be read and experienced. I can only say that the writing is really interesting. It's not the typical writing. There is no, just a random page, there is no punctuation at the end of the sentences. It's an interesting experience. It's almost like Ali Smith in terms of narration, no points, and you know, seeing how beautiful writing can look on a page, although it's not quite that much. But it's a great book. I really recommend you read this, especially if you live in the UK, or if you have black friends living in the UK, or simply if you're interested in educating yourself about the black experience in the UK in the majority of cases in this book. Do pick it up because it's a really important read, and even if it's fiction, it's a book that really adds a lot to your understanding of your surroundings. And as I said, I live in Southeast London. My neighbours are black. I didn't know they maybe struggled with some things mentioned in this book, something that didn't even occur to me. So it was really eye-opening, I can say. Next book I read is Circe by Madeline Miller. This is a retelling of the traditional Circe story. Circe is one of the characters in the Odyssey, written by Homer, and she is a sort of witch, sorcerer, who lives on an island off the Italian coast or off the Greek coast, you don't really know, in the Mediterranean basically. And she is the daughter of a god and a nymph, which means she potentially could have some powers, but she doesn't personally have some powers. She does have the power to be a witch though. And this really talks about her experience as somebody who is the daughter of a god and a nymph, her experience dealing with gods, and her experience being sort of banished away, because you realize fairly early on in the narration that she doesn't have a good relationship with her father's side of the family, also with her mom's side of the family. She sort of gets banished from the community where she was born into. In terms of plot, not much happens. A lot of this book is quite static, and I do realize when you have a character in exile on an island, a tiny island, not much can happen, but she has quite a lot of visitors because she gets sailors and all that, and the key relationship in terms of, you know, human interaction that she has with a human is with Odysseus, or Ulysses if you want to use the Latin form of it, who is also the main character of the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. You see how these two characters interact in a very different way from what we learn from the Odyssey. So you see sort of like the backstory, and how there is even a tiny little reference. I mean, I tapped so many things in this book because I made a video about it, but there are so many references to Homer himself, as in, oh, and then he retold the story saying that I was doing this and that. So that's quite pleasant to read. I think it's a nice little touch. In terms of book itself, I'm not particularly fond of it. It's a 3-star, but it's a weak 3-star, as in it's a book, came, did what it wanted to do, but didn't add anything. The narration itself was alright, but it was a bit bland. I would have wanted to see more about Circe, and for the majority of the book, and I mentioned this in the reading vlog as well that I did, for the majority of the book she's sort of like being quite stagnant as a character and sort of crying about what happened to her. Not physically crying, but you know, being very, she's sulking for a big chunk of the book. So for me it was a very weak 3-star. The reason why I gave it 3 stars is because towards the end it sort of redeems itself with another main character that enters the story, but other than that, that was it for me. The next 2 books are going to be fairly quick because both of them, again, were on the shortlist for the International Book Prize, so I talked extensively about them in the other video, which will be linked somewhere on the screen, maybe, if I remember to do it. If not, enjoy me dancing with my hands. The book I'm talking about is Tyll by Daniel Kehlmann, translated by Ross Benjamin. Yes, I got that right. And this book is about Tyll Eulenspiegel. I had it right the first time I said it. Tyll Eulenspiegel, who is this sort of jester figure that lives in Germany during the 30 Years' War. This book has a lot of, it's obviously a historical novel, but it has elements of sort of German folklore throughout the narration. The figure of Tyll, I still don't know whether Tyll actually is a figure in German culture or is something that has just been created for the purpose of this book. But either way, Tyll is sort of this character that's known pretty much throughout Germany maybe by the end of the narration, and he's this jester-like figure. He can walk on ropes and he can be, you know, quite funny, make fun of the court and all that. This book's narration was really nice. You can tell it's a smart book because there is a lot of political criticism that can also apply to today's sort of political environment throughout the pages of this book. That being said, it didn't do too much for me. It's a solid 3-star. Yeah, I think it's more a 3-star. It's a solid 3-star. It's sort of like Inconvenient Daughter. It's a good book, and you can tell there is a lot of effort gone into it, but personally it didn't quite move too much inside me, and that's why it's just sort of like a 3.5 star for me. If you want to know more, as I said, check out the video about the International Booker Prize shortlist because I talk more about it. But yeah, that was Tyll for me. The other book that was on the International Booker Prize shortlist and that read in August was The Memory Police. Again, you can tell I'm not passionate about this book until as much as, you know, The Adventures of China Iron or The Enlightenment of the Greengage Tree, because I'm not going too much in depth with them. This one though had a really interesting premise and I was expecting to like it much more than I did. So The Memory Police follows the life, well, some events in the life of the main character. The main character is a novelist who was born and raised and lives on this island. This island is probably in Japan because you can see some elements of Japanese life and some elements of Japanese culture popping up here and there in the narration. Otherwise it could be anywhere in the world. This island is quite special because stuff starts to disappear. It doesn't disappear in terms of goes missing. It starts disappearing as in it no longer exists one day to the next. Together with the fact that stuff starts to disappear, and that can be tiny things such as ribbon or duck, and it can go up to things like your hand has disappeared. Together with the actual disappearance of things, you have the memory of those things being completely erased from your mind. It is not a mechanical process. There is nobody that sort of puts a weird helmet on your head and erases your memories. It's all sort of, it all happens almost immediately. You wake up one morning, you know something has disappeared, you realize, for instance, oh, the concept of book is completely gone. I forgot everything about books. So that's that. One of the big things in the plot is that fairly early on, when she just has a very few things, and there are just a few things that have disappeared here and there, the memory police, who are the people in charge of enforcing the disappearances, so the ones who are in charge of, say, if the concept of book disappears, making sure that people are burning their books and forgetting about it. The memory police starts getting a little bit more violent towards the people who do not have the ability to forget. So there are some strange people who, instead of forgetting immediately what the concept was, they keep on remembering it for years and years and years on end until probably they die. One of the people that had this ability was the main character's mum, who was made to disappear when the main character was just a kid. Another person who has this ability is the main character's editor. So she's a novelist and she's got an editor, and she realizes early on in the narration that the editor does not have the ability to forget. And with that, she decides to hide him, and together with another character who doesn't have a name other than the old man, together with the old man, they decide to hide the editor. And so you have the adventures of the main character trying to safeguard herself and the old man, and also the person hiding. But then on the other hand, you also have this sort of contrasting thing, which is her duty to see things disappear, so her understanding that things need to disappear. So it's quite controversial in that sense. The narration was really, really well done, but I felt like it lacked that oomph towards the end that made me understand a little bit more why this was this. Obviously, if this is not read in a simple, you know, story thing, you can tell that there is a lot going on into this. It's all about political power and the power governments have to make things disappear in terms of, you know, say healthcare. Healthcare is free in a lot of countries. It could become private if the government decided to do so. Education, same thing. So it's very, very relatable. And I forgot to say, I would say this book is a solid 3.5 stars, so sort of like Tyll. It was really good. You can tell that a lot of research has gone into that, but I just wanted a little bit more to lift up the narration, and I think that's also why this book didn't win the International Book Prize. And finally, we come towards the end of this video with the final book, which is responsible for the bags under my eyes, because I stayed up all night reading it. Or not all night, until midnight reading it. Finished it just before midnight, which means I finished it on the 31st of August, which means we talk about Expectation by Anna Hope. Expectation is a novel, contemporary literary fiction novel written by Anna Hope. It touches upon the lives of 3 main characters, Kate, Hannah, Lisa, and they are all friends. The narration starts when they are late teenagers, and it continues up until they are in their 40s, late 40s, yeah. It's a story about friendship and how 3 incredibly different people want completely different things in their life, yet they do not manage to fulfill what they want within the expected sort of deadlines that they give themselves or society gives themselves. It's about friendship as well, so the way you relate to other people who for you are almost like acquired siblings, basically, your best friends, and what you do because you love them, but also what things you do to hurt them because you compare yourself to them. I was crying last night in bed as Andrew was asleep and I was finishing this book, just because parts of this book really, really resonated. I'm not saying that it resonates with my friendship experience, because as I mentioned on my Instagram profile, it's very, very different from the kind of friendship that I have with my best friends. But it resonated with me on a female level. As a woman, some of these things in this book are so real, so true, so raw. Another reason why I really enjoyed this book is because it's set in London, and as you know, I live in London. It's set in a part of London close to where I used to live the first year that I moved to the UK. So it has a sort of connection to parts of my life in 2014-15. So that was quite nostalgic to read about. But I think overall the narration was pleasant. I know some people, I was reading some reviews online, and were saying, oh, it's so sad and all the characters are very dislikable and all that. For me, a dislikable character doesn't mean that the book is dislikable. It just means that the author built a good character. So yes, there are some dislikable characters in this book. The main characters, I didn't particularly like any of them, but at the same time, the book is really good. And for this reason, I gave it 4 stars. And if you want to read about female friendship, read this book. If you want to read about female friendship in the UK, read this book. If you want to read about female friendship in the US, read this book, which I reviewed in my previous video, 2 videos ago, I don't know. I'm not going to go into detail with this because this is a reading wrap up, but UK, US, love them both. This one is better. So my tea is still sort of almost acceptable in terms of temperature, so I'll go finish this cup, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing what I read over the past couple of months. I hope you had a nice summer, you managed to do some reading. Did you take a break? What's the best book you read? What's the worst book you read? Have you read any of the books that I mentioned in this video? And what do you think of them? Do you agree with me or not? Do let me know. Leave a comment, they really do mean a lot to me and not many people leave comments, so do leave a comment please. And also don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you liked it, or dislike it if you really, really hated it. But don't forget to subscribe, that really helps a lot this channel and it's a side project for me, so I take pleasure in making these videos, but I would love to have the extra encouragement, so yeah, don't forget that. And if you have an Instagram account, follow me at myfullbookshelf, all one word. Thank you for watching, bye bye.